All right, what is up, guys? Just recently, I think it was this morning, SDF did a Q&A in the Dark and Darker Discord. If you don't know, it's at the official Dark and Darker Discord, occasionally in the Q&A channel that you can go in there, they'll open it up, you can ask questions, and the devs will answer it. And just recently, like I said, they had a couple this morning, and I'm going to go over some of the really important things that I think were mentioned because there's a lot of really, really big stuff that they talked about, like you see on here. They're talking about Sorcerer, and there's a few other things. I'm not going to go over every single thing he responded to because there was a lot of it, and a lot of it is like stuff like him mentioned, like fishing is going to be coming eventually. The stuff like I think I have like Quiver on here, but he mentioned a lot of things. Like he talked about going in depth on their ideas of like the gear gap in the game, why patch like 68, 69, and all that happened, that type of stuff. Like I'm not going to get into everything. So if you want to read everything, feel free to go check it out for yourself. Like I said, it's in the Dark and Darker Dev Q&A or tab on the Discord, so feel free to do that. So just to start it off, the Sorcerer have his own spells. Based on the development so far, the Sorcerer is probably going to be the class with the most spells, and I didn't forget about Wizard. This makes sense to me, because obviously if you guys have been following what I've said about Sorcerer, Sorcerer is supposed to be like a dual casting class where you have a spell in each hand. So if you don't have that many spells, it kind of reduces the amount of combinations. And I will say for fun, this is going to be great because it's going to be sick having a bunch of spells, being able to like create a bunch of combinations with them. That's really cool. However, obviously, on the other side of like playing against it and balance, it's going to be kind of an issue because when you're playing against this class and they have a million different things they can do, it's not that fun. You never know what's coming next. It makes it really, really hard to deal with. But at the end of the day, fun is the most important thing. If the class is really fun, great. That's like the number one thing. Other than that, they said they didn't forget about Wizard, so I assume Wizard will probably be getting maybe some new spells soon or something. I mean, most classes kind of need new things, but it is interesting to say they will have their own spells. I think a lot of people like kind of what they thought. It's like with some other classes they're talking about coming out is some of the stuff that's on Wizard would be moved over to Sorcerer, and then the Wizard gets new things like stuff like Lightning Strike or Chain Lightning would go over to the Sorcerer, and they would have new spells for Wizard. Because originally how Wizard was designed and it was like told as was Wizard is like the utility spellcaster, right? Like it does damage, but its like main goal isn't to do damage. It's to have like, things like haste, invis, magic lock, ignite, all of these spells that aren't necessarily damage spells, but you can still do damage, but you also have these like nice, either out of combat or buffing spells to give your team and yourself. So, moving on, I'm trying to get like, the like less important things out of the way first. Um so this right here, this is talking about Quiver. Somebody said, "Hey, when is Quiver coming?" And SDF, sorry, Ranger players, but he said this is basically a meme, and I want it too. But the person who should be working on it is currently focused on more important things, so it is being put on hold for a while. Whatever that developer has time for, whenever that developer has time, it will be a priority. So yeah, I mean, it does not look like Quiver's coming anytime soon. I think originally they said it wasn't coming next wipe, like the wipe. It was supposed to be coming the wipe after this upcoming one. So that was at the beginning of this wipe. So it's anywhere between like 6 months out, I'd say. And I'm gonna be honest with you. I've said this many many times before. Okay, if you guys can't do Quiver, cool, right? Like I get it. It's hard to do. However, you could put in like a very very crude version of it. Make arrows here like super super simple. Make arrows larger. Make them like make it something that goes in your inventory, right? Instead of arrows being a 3x1, make them a 3x2 and allow them to stack up to like 50 or 100. Probably 100. That would make more sense for a 3x2. Or leave them as a 3x1 and make them stack up to 50. If you want the Quiver to be in the game so people don't have to carry their arrows like that, just increase the stack size of arrows. I know, like, people are like, oh, but then they'll never run out of arrows. Like, realistically, when do they ever run out of arrows now, right? Like, how many times have you ever seen a ranger actually run out of arrows? Because I literally don't think I've ever seen it, unless they just forgot to bring arrows or they had to drop them to pick up gear. And the Quiver would fix that anyways. So just make it a little bit easier. It's a really, really simple solution. And I'm not saying Ranger needs buffs right now. Ranger's incredibly strong. But it's just a nice quality of life change that happens that doesn't really affect balance, that I don't understand why it isn't in the game. Right? Like, going and changing the amount of, instead of stacking in 20, it stacks in 50 or 100. Like, I can't imagine that's a complicated thing. Maybe there's a reason they don't want to do it. I've never seen them say anything about it. But yeah, Quiver not coming anytime soon. So, this is about a new player dungeon. We have created a dungeon called Sewer, and it will likely be the first dedicated dungeon for new players. We haven't yet decided when and in what form we'll launch this, but we'll continue to focus on onboarding new players. So this is very much saying they've already, like, they made a new dungeon, which is pretty interesting. the casual players, or I say the casual players as in like the players getting into the game, the new players, or it's pretty much like a tutorial dungeon for them. Go in, learn the ropes. I assume this is gonna be maybe it's like gated so you can't enter it if you're above a certain level, or it's only base kit or something. Because even in like the base kit lobbies, like the under 24 gear score lobbies, you have the issue of you can't really like even if you go in, there are going to be people in there that shouldn't be, people that have played the game for a long time or whatever. So maybe instead of doing it like it's your character level dependent or gear score requirement, you make it so it's like fame dependent. Like if you have like above 200 fame or something, or not, that's 200 is kind of high. Maybe if you have above like 50 or 100 fame, then you can't go in these lobbies because by then, in theory, you should be going into the others. But it certainly is interesting. Or you just make it because the thing is, even if you make the loot like there's like no loot in there, the players still aren't going to want to like. There are still going to be people that go in there just to kill the Timmies. I know it happens, right? It's a thing. So, this is something mentioning about the socket. The socket system is currently in the works and will be released next season, and I wanted to help solve the problem of random modifiers taking too long to get BIS. I'd like to use this question as an opportunity to explain why I'm so focused on item balance. For the record, I should say that I was the one who was initially interested in bringing random modifiers to the game and keeping the gap between items large and widening it further, and that's what the alpha looked like as a result of that design. But now I've changed my mind and am focusing in the opposite direction. I mean, I think this answers a question we had for a very long time, and I say we as in, I guess me, but I'm generalizing that to you guys. But whenever this game first came out, if you guys were there, you remember it was super broken. You could get +3 all, you could roll weapon damage on every piece of gear, move speed everywhere. The game was super, super broken, and gear was really, really OP. That was just like, that's how it was. And then SCF said, "Oh, my vision is to have the gear like squished, like the gear is way more balanced, like everybody has a fair fighting chance against everybody, no matter your gear." And those are completely opposites. When we've seen like over the progression of the game, SDF has very clearly shown that I guess he has changed his ideas and his opinions on what he wanted the game to be. And I don't know whether or not it's healthy. I definitely think there is a certain level of gear disparity that is good for the game because it motivates players to get that gear, and the players that have the gear feel good about getting it, right? Like there's very definitely a healthy level that you have to reach. And he said, random modifiers are a fun tool for players to create different builds for themselves and for us. They're a great way to increase player playtime. However, random modifiers are like gambling, forcing players to invest a lot of time and making it harder for players with less playtime, the majority of players being mid to low level, to get BIS items. It also has a problem of making BIS items very expensive because the time it takes to get good item is so long, which is also a strong incentive for RMT and cheaters. I mean, like I don't think that's like I mean the thing is you're always gonna have RMT, you're always gonna have cheaters. It doesn't matter how much the gear is. Even when like the gear is squished, people are still gonna RMT. They're because they will pay for any advantage they can. And cheaters are always gonna cheat, right? That's just you like making the items worse for everybody else as and like using when the items are too good or the items are too expensive, it makes people more likely to RMT and cheat. Like that's just not good. Like you don't make the game worse to try to combat cheaters and RMTers. And I know that's not the main thing they're saying. That's just kind of like an afterthought. But yeah, I just really, really want to say that. And then because of this, players at the mid and low levels of the player period quickly realize that this is a game that they can't compete in properly without investing countless hours, and they leave. Of course, there are many reasons why players leave, but this is a big one. I think this is fair. I definitely think this is a fair point. That is, I mean, inherently, that is the problem with a competitive PvP game like this, is that if you do not put in as much time as somebody else, their gear is going to be better, and inherently they will have a much larger advantage over you. But the thing is, it's very hard to get around this, like, because it's just always going to happen. And to some extent, that is why, like the lower gear score lobbies exist, because these people that don't play as much and don't have as good gear, they can run it there, like, in like the 124 gear score lobby or whatever. They can go there and they don't have to worry about people bringing in too much better gear. I do think this is a good thing, that like this is a good reason for them to increase the level of loot you find, and like because if you get gear better, like if you go in and you're looting purples nonstop, you run that level of gear more. Because the hardest part for these players is to learn how to play the game and then get that good gear. Because once you can get good gear, you can start killing players and getting even more gear. Because once you get decent at PvP, cash just starts flowing in. Like you start making so much gold off people you kill. Like any random player in HR, you could make at least a couple thousand gold off of. Just like off of selling like all their like random garbage items. If you find somebody that's good geared, you can make 10 to 15k or even more. And that's just how the game is. But it's like the hard part is learning the game and getting to that point where you could start like PvPing and winning fights effectively. But I am super interested in the socket system. Like you said, like he wants this to like pretty much make it so it's easier to get good items. And So, I mean, we haven't heard how it's going to work yet. Obviously, you assume it's like if you consider something like Path of Exile or, Diablo or something like that, where you socket a gem in and it gives you, I guess, not Path of Exile, more like Diablo, but you socket a gem into a piece of gear and, that gem has like +1 strength. You put it on the gear and the gear now has +1 strength. The question is how will gear sockets work? Will a socket take the place of an item roll? Will they have all the normal amount of rolls and it can and like the socket will exist on top of it? Will all pieces of gear have sockets? Will there be multiple? That's the thing that we have to find out with the socket system and when it comes to the game. But I'm very interested in it. It adds a level of customization to the game that I think is really cool. And something that he mentioned before is like people getting attached to gear. I think I read this. I don't think I have the screenshot of that here, but he mentioned that whenever gear is too good, people get attached to gear and they feel bad about losing it. But it's like I don't think that's necessarily a bad thing because when you like get attached to gear, it's like you feel bad when you lose it, yes, but when you find a piece of gear, it makes you really excited to get it. Right, and then being able to customize gear and put your own make it more yours because that's the thing when you're playing a game like this, an item is never yours. It's never yours forever. It's just yours for the moment, right? It's just your turn to use that item. Eventually, unless you leave it in your stash the whole wipe, I mean, even if you do, it's eventually you're gonna lose it. The game's gonna wipe, right? Gear is not permanent, never will be. So no matter what, you're eventually gonna lose your items. So you just have to make it feel really good. You have to make it feel better to get items than it is bad to lose them, right? And being able to customize items feels nice because then you can make mid items into really good items, or you can make really good items into even better items. And lastly, this is probably the biggest part. Basically, our big goal for new content is to add more in-game goals. We're also interested in making the existing game loop healthier in a number of ways. We're interested in adding a variety of in-game goals. For example, Arena was designed as an in-game goal for PvP players and will be launching Arena rankings this season. We already have the MMR system, so it's assumed they'll probably just throw that up on like some kind of grid and you have your ranking system. Something super bare bones, but I'm very excited for that. That's not to say that's the end of the PvP in-game goals. We have a lot of ideas, and once Arena is established, we'll think about what's next. I'm kind of curious what they mean by this. Maybe they mean tournaments. Maybe they mean some sort of dedicated PvP maps or something. I don't know. But I'm actually very interested in what else they could possibly mean by this other than Arena. Also, for players like completionists, we're going to add an achievement system next season so you can collect and achieve things beyond the season. That's really cool because then you let's say you get rewarded for completing all the quests, or you get rewarded for finding rare items, doing finding rare mobs, killing the rare or what's called or killing bosses, that type of thing. Very very interesting. And I think it's really nice. This is just it adds it's even if it seems very small, it adds something to work towards. It adds something that you're gaining. It adds something that you could potentially grind for. Like, oh, I want to complete all the achievements. It's cool. And we're looking to add 2 big systems to improve the existing game loop. This is specifically tied to addressing the shortcomings of the 3-layer system. We are working on a continuous entry system similar to the floor matchmaking system that we talked about earlier, and this is about creating an environment where the player is constantly engaged inside the dungeon. This will allow the player to escape immediately or immediately progress to deeper dungeons. We'll share more details in the future when we have a more finalized look. So, this is interesting. This is very interesting. So I guess you would assume that what I'm guessing this means, because they mentioned earlier, or something else where they don't want lobbies to feel dead, and they don't want too many matchmaking queues. So imagine if you can queue up, let's say you queue up ruins, but you only want to go to crypts. So you queue up for ruins and you select crypts, and it just loads you into the waiting room for crypts, and you wait for the entire first floor to play out, and then you go down to crypts. So you don't have to do the entire first floor. I assume that's what that means. I mean, obviously, or maybe it's something else they'll add in later on, or maybe you load into ruins and then from the moment you load in, there's always a red staircase open to go down, right? Or you can always jump into the abyss to go down to the ice abyss. I think things like that are interesting. I like having more accessible features to go down to other floors. And then, like they said, they're adding requeuing. So if you do that and everybody leaves, more people come back in so the lobbies aren't dead, which is the biggest issue with the 3-floor dungeon. Is the moment you leave the first floor, 9 times out of 10, that's it. Everybody's gone. Everybody's either dead or they took blues. Pretty much no one goes down to the second floor, and even less go down to the third floor. In my entire time playing, I think I may have had 1 trio fight in Inferno. And, maybe a couple in solos or duos, but almost nobody ever goes down there. It's very, very few people. But I think this is like in my mind, this right here, the continuous system, like the entry system, this is the one thing that should have waited for 3 floor. Like I do not think 3 floor should have been in the game until this system was added because it doesn't feel complete. Like this feels like 50% of the 3 floor system that just wasn't added. I mean, as like I'm sure everybody else, it just feels like we're playing a system that is missing a very, very key component. And they said we're also working on a random dungeon system that was shuffled to dungeon modules. We've been modularizing for a while now, so this is really good. This is something a lot of people want, where you just like they randomly generate the modules inside, so there's a different layout every single time. I've say like I think this is really cool. However, there are some very, very major issues with this. One of them being like certain modules just can't fit beside others because how they're laid out. You need doors to go from one area to the other, and I think with Arena, they're kind of like how the arena maps are laid out. They're kind of helping that because if you look at the arena maps, there's 2 doors on like every side of the map, right? Or there's like 2 on each side, or like each of the 4 walls, there's 2 doors per. So if they have all the maps designed like that, then pretty much any module could connect to anywhere and just have the doors to go through there. But anyways, that is going to wrap it up for the Q&A. Like I said, this wasn't every single thing they mentioned. I just want to cover some of the big things that I really liked, and I think the more important things. Like some of the stuff like he talked about, like I said, SDF has like a big paragraph like this about him talking about why they like, their thoughts on the gear gap, how they want to like do it and stuff like that. But truthfully speaking, I don't really care to talk about that. My thoughts and opinions on that aren't very many, so I would just be reading it off and say nothing, going to the next thing. If you want to read that, feel free to go check it out in the Q&A section yourself. But with that being said, feel free to leave your thoughts and opinions down below. And as always, like and subscribe if you want to, and I will catch you guys next time. Peace.